The member of Parliament for South Dying is also a legal practitioner, Roxanne Nelson Dapamokbo is here. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Roland.
How are you?
Good morning to your viewers.
I've heard of you.
Good morning to
Mesa. Andrew Agyapong Mesa, member of Parliament for Second, also a legal practitioner, is here. You used to practice?
Well, I got my certificate to practice not too long ago, so I'm going to hit the ground running. So
Okay, so
indeed,
it
I've
means
not
that
been in
because-
court since I came into Parliament because I didn't have permission, even though I'd applied. It took a while for the process to
now
be
you
completed. So now I can, yes,
do some work on the side. It doesn't seem you have to be in court, but you can do some consulting.
Absolutely.
So solicitor work.
Some solicitor.
Yeah.
But I do Mondays. I go to court.
You go to court?
On Mondays.
Oh, okay. For your firm.
Yes.
Great. That's why you look good all the time.
Oh my.
But you necessarily need extra income to survive in this political environment. I mean, it goes without saying.
These are old briefs. These are old briefs. These are old briefs.
Well, let's see how it goes.
Anyway, good morning.
Good morning.
to my
Good
good
morning.
friend.
Good
Of course,
morning.
to our
I'm told
cherished this morning.
Anas has a piece on Parliament. You know about that? It's being rumored, speculated. But there's one involving the football fraternity that will be shown on June 6th. Already, we've had Kennedy Agyapong, who is a member of Parliament for Asin Central, raising some issues and feels that he's entering into the bedroom of people. He needs to be stopped before the time there's been publication of pictures, etc. And now the GJ has come out with a statement saying that the way it is going, Anas needs to be protected, etc. Let me pick your few thoughts on it before we go mainstream into the issues we wanted to discuss.
Well, I saw the GGA statement yesterday. And I was wondering how somebody who is not known to anybody
is known to
at
people,
least
not to the public.
Not to the public, will require protection. You know. And so I guess that the law enforcement agencies will have to make a determination whether indeed his life is at risk to you know, as it were, provide him with some security. But to the extent that Kennedy Agyapong is raising issues, I mean, he's not the first to have raised issues about the modus with which Anas uses to, as it were, elicit, if you like, evidence from people and brands it as expose. You know, indeed, yesterday I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine, and he informed me that one of the customs officers who was apparently exposed.
Oh, in that initial, one of
Sep's tape was set free by the court because he had sent someone with a 50 Ghana cedi note to go and buy him credit. Now the person comes back with the change and the scratch card, and of course that is the bit that was captured and put on the tape as he being corrupt. His lawyers got a court to compel Anas to produce the full tape, and it turned out that you know, essentially what had been put in the tape as some corrupt act was in fact not the case. People have complained that, you know, essentially baiting and entrapping people in itself has its own issues. I believe that the Evidence Act says that evidence, no matter how obtained, is essentially admissible. So, to correct me if I'm wrong, you know, I'm not a criminal practitioner. So, you know, and these things, if you don't work with it every day, sometimes you get to forget some of the things. You know, so to that extent, I mean, to be honest, I've never really followed his work, you know, because he did some supposed expose about Africa Legal Aid, the coffee shop, so-called brothel issue, and that involved my cousin, and it was completely untrue, and she had to leave Ghana and all sorts of things. So I have a certain viewpoint with regards to his work. But then again, I mean, some of the things that he's done clearly exposes people who ordinarily ought to not be doing the kinds of things that they are caught on tape to be doing. And people ought to be held accountable for their actions. So, you know, it's a thin line, and you really can't, you know, as it were, pinpoint as to whether his modus ought to be criticized and not encouraged, or that, as his boss Kweku Baako, a very good friend of mine, has said, that his is to name and shame. You know, and of course, if there are no skeletons in your cupboard,
you should not be afraid.
Absolutely. You know, so I really do not have any particular view about what Anas does, you know, with respect to his work. But I guess if he helps the community and the society as a whole in putting people in check, you know, to guard their actions, there's a sense within which you can say it's useful, it's worthy of encouraging. Of course, there's also the sense where if you entrap people, you know, deliberately bait people, as opposed to walking into some act that they are known to be doing, and, you know, investigate to. I mean, to be sincere, I would rather wait for the tape to be aired, and then we'll see what it is that is in there, and then we can.
Roxanne.
First of all, good morning to my constituents, Pekik Bali Tongo,
Germany,
Bebe, of course, Germany, Afetili, you know, Kaira. It's extremely important to situate the preliminary discussions in some context. Anas, by all standards, has become a global icon in respect of the work he does. And so for me, if there's any form of threat on his life, he ought to be taken seriously. You recall recently, or just a couple of days ago, Franklin Kujo of Imani also received some threats for his work. You know, so we should be taking some of these things seriously. Quite apart from that, yes, my brother spoke about his views on the way Anas carries out his work, modus operandi. You see, if you look at the Evidence Act, we used to call it the Evidence Decree 323, particularly Section 51, it talks about relevance. Evidence, however obtained, once it's relevant, the court will admit it. Now, 52 talks about the fact that relevant evidence may not be admissible if, for instance, it will prejudice the case in issue or one party's case. But you see, in all this, very important category of public servants have been affected, but especially our judges. About 2 or 3 years ago, this country nearly collapsed. Yes, when the judiciary was the issues within the judiciary.
Or the fall banner.
Yes, became a subject of announced investigations. And in fact, 2 or 3 of the judges are still fighting. And as lawyers, when some of these things are playing out in court, we sometimes we pretend as if we don't care. But it forms part of the criminal jurisprudence, or our jurisprudence as a common law people. Now, the judges were fighting that the manner in which Anas obtained the evidence that government was relying on to investigate them or to discipline them was wrongful in law. And so to that extent, Section 52 of the Evidence Act should kick in and avail them. They were ignored to the extent that the Supreme Court made pronouncement that evidence, however obtained, however wrongfully obtained, if it is relevant, the court will look at it and place its probative value on it. So these three judges, they have left our shores. They are in ECOWAS court now. I think you are aware.
No, I'm not.
Okay, they are in ECOWAS court, simply fighting the fact that the evidence, the piece of evidence, the critical piece of evidence that the Judicial Council relied on to, as it were, dismiss them, was wrongfully obtained on that single principle of law. But the Supreme Court has affirmed the position of the Judicial Council, but they have taken it further to a global, to a sub-regional, to a sub-regional court. So it is very important that we have to weigh the two viewpoints. Now, Anas has been hailed for every single work that he's done. He's been hailed.
I think Obama came to mention himself.
Yes, I was going to make that point. I don't think an American president came. Maybe perhaps it will happen in the future that you and I will get mentioned for
Donald Trump.
The kind of work we are doing as young parliamentarians. But it hasn't happened yet. And Obama did so in the world of parliament. All right? That is by the side. Now, we speak of the fact that he's come under some heat, particularly from one of our own. But Kennedy was the same Kennedy who was praising Anas a few years ago for exposing corruption and all. Is it because today it is closer to him? Let's be careful. You even recall that the current president, when he was a candidate, he promised that when he comes, he will introduce a tax collection system, and he will adopt what he labeled the Anax principle, where he will get graduates, young graduates, send them undercover, so they can unearth companies that were, as it were, evading tax, who were all under declaring profits, so that by that, as a consequence, they will pay less tax. So it's become a phenomenon. He's helping to clean up the system, as it were, and so for me, let's see what the tape contains next week, and then we can carry the debate further. But I agree that in the course of his work, some innocent ones are also adversely affected. You should, as much as possible, try to minimize the extent to which innocent people or innocuous events are captured as corruptible, as our sense of corruption at play.
Right.
So the lives of innocent Ghanaians are not destroyed.
All right, okay, let's move on.
Ordinarily, I wouldn't have responded because the points that he's made are pretty germane, save to suggest that Kennedy is responding in the manner that he is doing because this is close to him. There's absolutely no basis to draw that conclusion, because if you listen to Kennedy, his view is that, look, yes, investigative journalism, by all means, but the way and manner this thing is going, purely on principle, if we don't stop and address it properly and put the issues in proper context, you'll be sitting at home tomorrow and somebody will come and film you and put it out there. And private conversations that we have, people's videos that they make privately are put out there in the public domain purely to tarnish people's image. Is that the way to go as a country?
I agree.
So let's not.
I agree with you. I agree. In fact, some of the judges, they were captured in their homes.
You see,
I saw a few of them even in their white shorts.
The point that I'm making really is this: that don't.
Okay, I will draw that comment.
Please, thank you.
That comment. Yes.
Very well.
I will draw that. Yes.
Yeah.
We've got to look at the minority accusing government of breaching the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. And it was at a press conference. The former Deputy Minister of Finance, Kesel Atoforsen, said instead of channeling monies realized from the petroleum sector into infrastructure development, government was rather diverting most of the monies into allocations, more like social welfare allocations, into consumption. For example, he said the annual report of the Petroleum Fund signed by the Finance Minister indicated that 196 million Ghana cedis of some 202 million realized from the petroleum sector was spent on service delivery in education. But it says that was at variance with the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund Act, which stipulates that 70% of total oil revenue allocated to the annual budget funding amount be used to support infrastructure development. His concerns followed the approval of the Finance Committee's report on petroleum funds for 2017. He goes on. He said a huge chunk of the money, instead of going into infrastructure, was going to free SHS. He said, giving a breakdown of the expenditure, he said 6 million Ghana cedis, for example, was used to defray scholarship claims. And he said government was breaching the Revenue Act. According to him, government projected to spend 796 million from the ABFA, but made 868 million and should have done more on the infrastructure front, etc. And the finance minister said, well, whatever it is, they'll take this matter up. Let me start with you, the honorable member for South Dying. The press conference was convened by spokesperson of finance for the minority.
Indeed. Now, what we are simply saying is that there are statutory stipulations regarding how revenues from the energy sector should be applied. Particularly the monies that we set aside for ESLA. Now, we have discovered that the government is not applying portions of the fund or the funds as the revenue as they come in to build fiscal infrastructure. And they are rather channeling it into some of their new social intervention policies, or their new policies on social intervention. And what that does is that when there is a deficit in infrastructure in the set subsector, then you will not have to go and look for money from elsewhere to intervene. So by this practice, they are creating a situation in the future where if we have a problem, if we have to expand, for instance, if we have to expand Takrady gas, if you have to expand the storage facilities that we have, if, for instance, we have to FPSO, the FPSOs, if there are issues, they have to be maintained. There's a high cost of maintenance and all that. You will have to look for money from elsewhere. So we are just cautioning them that they should stick to the law. They should ensure that they apply the 70% portion that the law stipulates to building or investing in infrastructure. Then the rest 30% that is available to you to use at your discretion as a government, you can channel them into your social intervention policies. It's a very simple call that we are making. I don't think that this should generate any heat anyway, because the report that they brought was very clear. We are not saying it. They indicated clearly that the monies are being channeled to free SHS and some other programs. And so clearly the 70% proportion that the law stipulates will be affected. Yes.
Oh, so it means that we're flouting the regulation, essentially. That's what the concern of the minority is.
Well, I don't think that is entirely accurate. Indeed, it's a complete falsehood, if you ask me. I heard him mention ESLA. No, he did.
Yes, I think that would have been.
But I thought that the issue relates to the petroleum funds.
More like
the ABFA and the Heritage Fund.
You see,
and
they are sister funds.
They can never be. They are regulated under a completely different regime.
But I'm saying they are sister funds.
They are not.
The ESLA,
Roxanne, please,
there are regulations governing the use of ESLA. There are regulations governing the use of petroleum funds. You understand my point?
Okay,
so
I get the context.
I cited ESLA as an example.
I get you.
That we can't funds that are supposed to go to
such
ESLA, such as ESLA or ABFA. You can't apply it in variance with what the regulation stipulates. That's the point I'm making.
You see,
clarify.
I really do not understand my friends on the other side.
You have never.
You have an issue, they claim. You have all the avenues within your power as a member of parliament to raise questions, ask questions of the minister to come and explain. Yet, they will take the populist route, organize a press conference, throw out all sorts of things, and when you ask them to prove, then they ask you that, well, it's an allegation, you prove it. Forgetting that the fundamental principle in law is that he who asserts must prove. I haven't seen a copy of their press conference, save the snippets that
media reports.
You know, but I really fail to see what their issue is, if it is not.
It's not the duty of the minority also, and even civil society. And I know PIAC has raised a number of concerns in his report as well. Even in 2017, they had raised those concerns about the expenditure, and if there are excesses, meaning that perhaps the entity or the individual managing that entity that is supposed to manage the way that expenditure or appropriation needs to go is exceeding bounds. They have to do
the PIAC report that was issued sometime this year relates to their era.
Well, I do know
where
that.
They
the
went
thing is the government is a continuum, so we have to put
no. Let's distinguish clearly the two different governments in place at the different times. Where PIAC had gone to verify the existence of projects that they claimed to have executed, and it turned out that those projects did not exist. So the question that they were posing,
I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong. Have you seen
what
the
is
PIAC
wrong?
report? Have you seen the PIAC report?
Yes, I've seen the PIAC report.
How many projects? How many projects? How many projects?
You see, Roxanne, is it not the case that the allegation that PIAC made was that they had gone around to several communities in the northern part of Ghana where specific projects that were reported to have been built were not in existence, and that
those
reports
let me make have since been debunked.
By who?
By the minority,
and that
evidence.
And that they had written to the minister to ascertain where it is that these projects are, because they have gone around in accordance with their mandate under the law, and they did not find these projects. There was not even an acknowledgement from the Minister of Finance at the time. So why are we sitting here now to make it seem as if everything was prim and proper and that PIAC came to throw some dust in the eyes of the public?
Indeed.
It's completely false.
We reacted with evidence.
You see, to the
Napo spoke to the issues with evidence. You are ignoring
and
that.
Roland, you have heard John Jinapo's reaction to the issues with evidence, because I haven't heard him.
Well, I've heard what the minority has said.
And what did they say?
But the PIAC report, if I recall what I read, PIAC wanted a response from the appropriate ministry, not the minority. So that's why I'm not making considerations when I have to make references, because the ministry is supposed to give the states of those projects, whether they have been implemented. And PIAC's concern was that they had written to the ministry had not.
But it's important to put the period that the letter was written.
Well, very well.
In out there, so that people can clearly understand that it was Mr. Setepe who refused to acknowledge the letter of PIAC and not Mr. Ken Ofori-Atta. It's important.
Well, the letter,
because
what the PIAC report quoted, sir, was that the letter was written, of course, in 2016.
Absolutely.
I believe in August thereabout.
Absolutely.
But as at the time that they had compiled their reports, the finance minister currently had also not responded to that letter.
Please, had they written to the finance minister referencing the letter that they wrote to the previous finance minister?
They wrote to a finance minister.
So please,
forget about the persona. It's not. This is not a personalized letter. This is a letter to the office of the finance minister. If you refuse to respond,
in excess of
amounts to the list of duty.
In excess of a year.
Interesting,
yes,
isn't it? Interesting.
It is not at all.
Interesting.
It is not.
It's the people of Ghana who will see,
of course,
but sir, in all truism, I believe what we're talking about is a concern being raised about institutional flouting of a regulation in relation to expenditure. So
I agree.
Should we be concerned? It's as if that we're pushing the issue to the back burner.
No, nobody is pushing the issue to the back burner. What I'm trying to let you understand,
yes, sir,
is that there are a multiplicity of files at the finance ministry. If PIAC hasn't written to Mr. Ofori-Atta to say that, look, since you assumed office, we had written a letter in September or August 2016 that we haven't received a response, and Mr. Ofori-Atta doesn't react to it, then you can say that the institution per se, under the direction of the current finance minister, is being delinquent in responding to letters.
But that's the case of PIAC.
But that's not the case of PIAC. I do not recall seeing in the PIAC report that they are blaming the current finance minister for not responding to the letter. They may not have said in the PIAC report,
but there was a formal event, a conference, a press conference that they convened, and to make some of these issues known. And the side commentary beyond the report really reflected that position or opinion that we can all summarize to say that's a conclusion of PIAC. So at the end of the day,
that's a conclusion that you reached.
It's not me. That's what PIAC says.
Well, I didn't hear PIAC say that.
So you can choose to ignore that, but that's the truth.
No, not at all.
Now the substantive issue too is that we seem to be spending money on a social welfare activity beyond even flouting or even overrunning.
That's why I said that I do not understand why, having all the arsenal that they have as members of parliament, they cannot ask a formal question for the minister to respond, but resort to press conferences and throw out.
But that is not wrong, is it?
No, I'm not saying it is wrong.
Okay.
But what formal response are you going to get from organization of a press conference as opposed to filing a question in parliament for the minister to come and explain?
Well, may I respond? May I respond?
Oh, if he wants to, let him.
May I respond? One, press conferences are one of the tools available to all members of parliament, not just minority members alone, to even members in government, to bring attention to critical national issues, to engage the media.
And there's a critical national.
Yes, so he's wrong there. Number two, question is also one of the critical accountability tools, or tools that we use to ensure that the executive becomes accountable to the legislature. But there are administrative difficulties. For instance, I have filed questions since October. They have not been listed. I am being urged to refile. All right? So you are saying that an urgent matter such as this, a ranking member, I agree, can file and move leadership to ensure that it is urgently listed.
Absolutely.
But hold on, but that takes a few days. But we are saying that as soon as the report was laid and debated and approved of, this lacuna was dictated. This misapplication of the funds, all right, was dictated. So we engage the media to bring attention to the issue, to use the media to bring national attention to the issue. Why should the government do that? And we are saying that when they do that, it amounts to a breach of the law. So we are just urging the government to desist. All right, to desist from doing that. Why? There are several issues we've taken to court, including the interpretation of total revenue, whether or not it is total tax revenue.
So your conclusion is that government is just arbitrarily?
Yes, in some of these matters.
Now I'm in power, so I can choose to do what.
So we are urging them to desist from such conduct.
See,
and he says that we should file a question.
But it's been spent. We're told that it's been spent on free SHS. You don't like free SHS?
Who says we don't have free? We started free SHS.
It's just a question.
We started free SHS, progressively free. What they are doing is also progressively free. And I keep saying, my daughter is informed too. I'm paying her school fees.
Now it looks like this one, the way they are implementing has been well embraced by.
No. There are systemic problems.
By the second cycle parents public.
Subsidy.
So today,
every
today
subsidy,
58 cedi subsidy to people
as opposed to the entire amount.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. So what do you think needs to be done? Who needs to take a certain action to?
We have made some
go to court.
We have made some demands. We have made some demands.
The press conference is needless, he says.
No. Why
go to court?
Why should we go to court?
File a question.
Oh, hold on. We have, in fact, within the week, we have issued 3 press statements. One in respect of the delay in releases of statutory funds, especially GET fund. Then the new directive to the MMDAs as to how to apply the common fund, which we have threatened that we will go to court if the demands that if they do not meet our demands. And so I said that it's like a demand notice.
You say you go to court.
Yes.
You should go to court. They're calling your bluff.
We'll do so.
Have you seen the directives that they have?
We will do so.
No, I've not seen it.
Hold on. You know why?
But it's
no, and let me tell you why. They knew. And I can, of course, Mesa is there. So people like that will tell that if you do this, they will look for the evidence and nail you. And so issue a viva voce.
And so they call
hold on. Yes, at seminars. And this seminars,
them.
Yes.
And nobody reported.
Hold on. And these seminars,
such laughable.
No, it is not. No.
Such laughable.
Mesa, don't sit here. Hold on. Don't sit here and say things in such manner.
They are laughable.
This is not laughable. You have done it.
Why is it not?
You have done it. You have directed the regional coordinating assemblies, councils, to instruct the assemblies to apply the fund. Come and deny.
Where is the directive?
Hold on. You see, and
show
I'm
me
saying,
the directive.
Oh, Mesa.
You said there's no formal directive.
You are better than that.
We are saying
they have done it.
How are you expecting me to?
You understand? So why are they asking the assemblies to pay 20% of their DSF?
Where?
To NAPCO applicants?
Where is it?
You understand?
Where's the directive?
Yes.
All right.
But
let's see. Yesterday, and let me tell you the mischief.
It is not about mischief.
Let me tell you the mischief.
It is something you have done. And you know that you have done it. You have issued the viva voce instructions.
Is that how communication
it is not
in the public sector is conveyed?
Communications, because that is why you are being arbitrary.
Look,
you are creeping all your MMDAs into line.
Let me tell you where the mischief
it is not about mischief.
In this communication.
Even the quantum of money going to the assemblies, we have reduced it.
Please, let me hear you, sir.
You see, the 2018 disbursements of the common fund has not been commenced.
No, needed comment before.
Why?
Because
we are almost approaching June, and you are happy to say that 2018.
When was the formula approved?
Why?
When was the formula approved?
It was approved several months ago.
In March of 2018.
Why?
Several
months ago, they have just paid the last quarter for 2017, and yet they come and tell us that there's an improvement in releases of statutory funds. You see?
Can we move on? I have an issue.
Look,
you know the first lady.
No directive exists.
Of course.
Formally.
No directive exists Communication in the public sector is not conveyed viva voce.
I see.
Please.
I see.
Let's not do this. Okay? In any event, look, if government is desirous of varying the formula.
Which formula?
Of the this
you,
year.
you have no such power. You come to parliament.
Absolutely.
Exactly. You come to parliament.
Yesterday,
you want to do so arbitrarily. You want to do so arbitrarily.
The point that I'm trying to make, that government has the numbers.
Okay.
In parliament to push
let's watch a video. Let's watch a video. There's this young man.
So it cannot be the case.
It has.
That oral instructions.
You have.
Okay, your point has been made. You're saying that it's not formal or
no such directive exists.
Okay. No such directive exists.
It's a creature of their imagination.
The administrator has.
You're fantasizing. It's okay. Now let's move on. There was an event by the First Lady yesterday.
We gave you 600 million for NAPCO. What do you want to do with that?
Please. There was an event by the First Lady. There seemed to be this viral campaign on social media about how the University of Ghana Medical Center, I hope that's the name, needs to be open. And so it says open UGMC now. There's a young man who started all this. He's a student of the University of Ghana. Was holding, I think, an inscription when the First Lady was cutting sword for an event at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. And I think he went to stand in front of the... And ultimately he landed at the Kolebu police station before he knew it.
For his conduct.
Yes.
Let me start with you. Just some few words on this.
Well, with respect to... So you want us to talk about the incident yesterday or
the incident and subsequently why we had to go and place him the police counterback?
Well, I understand from the snippets of information that I've gathered from the media this morning, that particularly the response from the police public affairs directorate, that clearly the Public Order Act requires that when you want to conduct some demonstration, some protest, you require a permit. That's what the law is. You ought to give the police notice of your intention to undertake such activity, and when they give you the permission, then you can go and as it were undertake that activity. In this particular case, that's not what happened, and so the gentleman, and to be frank, I mean, I only had snippets of it this morning. I was not aware that this incident had even occurred yesterday. I knew the First Lady was cutting a sword for the building of a pediatric center at Kolebu, but I didn't hear of this arrest until this morning when I was getting ready to come here. And I heard
that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
You know, so I don't know the entire details regarding the circumstances of his arrest, but that is the explanation that I got from the police public information director. And I think that, you know, yes, we may have a right to demonstrate, we may have a right to protest, we may have a right to solicit online signatures to support a particular event that you think is not being handled properly. But in doing so, I guess that is also incumbent on us to abide by the laws of the country and not do things that clearly will land you, on the wrong side of the law.
Roxanne?
I am scandalized. The job is difficult.
Good job. Good job.
Advocacy on behalf of government.
Why?
Now, is the First Lady a public officer?
Yes.
Is she a public officer?
You mean recognized?
Is she a public officer?
You mean recognized by?
Is she a public officer?
You mean recognized by the Constitution?
I am asking you. Is
well,
the
not
First
recognized
Lady
by
a public
the
officer.
No, not recognized.
So if a Ghanaian, a harmless, unarmed Ghanaian, holds up a notice at
this
an event,
statement that you make doesn't even defeat your own
it does not.
assertion.
No.
So what if the First Lady is not a public officer?
Please, let him make
What basis did he have in going to stand there?
Exactly my point.
Exactly.
That is a public event, and the First Lady has been invited to make a speech.
No,
please.
That's not it.
Oh,
this was a private event organized by the foundation.
Event.
Of course.
I see. Organized
It's
by
the,
whom?
it's the Rebecca Foundation that was cutting the sword
But
to commence the project.
It's a public event.
How does that become a public
the
event?
fo- the
Doesn't
found-
he need
the foundation
to comply with the public order?
No.
So
By
what
his
kind of
conduct.
inconsistent arguments
It's
are you
not an
making?
inconsistent argument. You have made the argument, and I'm trying to expose you by saying that what happened cannot, by any stretch of imagination, be construed to mean a demonstration. It cannot be a demonstration.
What was it?
He held up a notice.
Is that a notice?
Yes. What is it?
That's a placard.
Yes, but that's a notice. If he says that open UG, University of Ghana Medical Center now, is that not a notice? A simple inscription. So the question is it directed at the First Lady? Is First Lady the President of the Republic of Ghana? So how can anybody construe that the information the gentleman has on the placard is directed at the First Lady? Don't sometimes.
So what business did he have going there?
But it's a public event.
What makes it public?
Because the First Lady claims that she's doing a private event at a public place. Is Kolebu not a public hospital?
So you can't have a private event in a public place.
So once you do so,
it becomes a public event. Amazing.
So yes, it's not amazing.
So I go and organize an event at Accra International Conference Center.
Yes.
And you have a right to walk in as you wish. Because it's a private event. It's a public
charge
event.
Money? Did you invite
Do you have
people? Exactly. So once you leave it as open invitation.
Please.
You see, that I am scandalized by the high sense of intolerance of this government. This government is becoming so intolerant.
What do you mean by that?
Why? I can give you plethora of examples. You understand?
Give me.
There's no way this boy should have been taken to a police station. The best they could do is to say that you are disrupting events.
So government is becoming
you are not invited to the event. Where is your invitation card? You are not invited, so they take him out.
Well, there's been
you understand?
some commentary from the office of the First Lady who says that it's not the security of the First Lady who did that, it's the police who took an action.
Yes, what charges are they slapping on him?
What do you think should be the charge?
I don't know. They should tell me.
Roxy Nelson Dapamakbo is a member of parliament for
You see, he couldn't give you the examples of the intolerance.
He was
plethora. He couldn't give you one.
And then also member of parliament for Second D.
So throw it out and leave it.
Yes, Andrew Japamesa. Good morning, gentlemen. Intolerance of this government.
This government is becoming so intolerant.